welcome back. And before going on to the break, we were discussing about the Jummah and the blessings of Jummah. And of course, it's Jummah Mubarak and everyone out there. So, Shahzad, and we were also discussing, especially when we started. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, before this show started, that how it's very much important that the small businesses or medium enterprises, we need to put so much effort into them so that they could spawn the economic activity.
True.
And it's even more important, especially in the era of the global inflation, because we can see how the economy is shrinking around the world, around the globe. And Pakistan is, of course, no immune to such kind of shocks. And we've seen that Pakistan has so much talent and potential. It just needs a small, I think, upward thrust so that people could, venture into such kind of ventures and make sure that our economic activity or the growth goes on.
Exactly. And Haja, it was back in 2000, I think, early 2000 when, the SME sector actually started to grow over here in Pakistan. And with that, we saw those, vocational trainings coming in, Salai Machine, and all of that training and economic activity was generated, because that's the sort of economic activity which is actually going to help the country prosper in terms of economy as well. So, speaking about that, obviously that's something which is very important. The idea was relatively new back then, and then not a lot of families were supporting their women to go outside. So I think in the first place, what we really need to discuss is that, how far we are, in terms of women empowerment. And then, when we talk about the gender gap, I think that's something which we really need to talk about as well, because over here at PTV, we get paid the same, right? And that's something which we like. And, there's no harm in it as well, because she contributes as much as I contribute. And it's not even about contribution, it's about having the same designation. So why not over here in Pakistan? And what the research says is that it's the women chief executive officers who are more capable, and they generate more revenues as well. And to talk about women empowerment and how to empower women around you, ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful expert over here inside the studios amongst us, who happens to be the head of innovation for Women Ventures and Evaluation, and she is Ms. Shumaila Rifaqat. Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning, how are you?
Wa alaikum salam ji, I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, wonderful to have you.
It's good to be here, thank you.
Likewise. So first up, I think we are going to get started with women empowerment, and so the SMEs came in, early 2000s. That's something which I remember, because RDFC and SBFC had a merger, and then the first SME bank came in place, and that was a public bank as well. So from there onwards, take us through, how do you think that SMEs has actually helped, grow economy, whether if they have, and then, God forbid, if they have not, what's the problem?
So SMEs, as you have already said, they're a significant part of your economy. Most of it is informal, almost 70%.
True.
And most of that economy is SMEs, and they help economic growth, and they trigger economic growth, they create jobs. So for an economy, it's very important that you have economic activity and you have jobs, so SMEs help support that. The government also realizes that, not only here, globally as well, and there have been several initiatives to support SME growth in Pakistan. Now, economic environment is very different, it's a factor which is very important, but it's something that an individual business does not control, but it's affected by it. So the first problem they face is access to finance. So if you have a business, you'll start it with a small amount, but when you reach a certain stage, you need money. And that's the problem. Access to finance is the problem. They don't find that money because commercial banks would not lend to them, because these are high-risk businesses, mostly informal. So where do they get financing from? Friends and family. And how long can they get it and what amount? So if you want to grow beyond a certain amount, you need formal finance.
But I think for that, we really need to discuss the ecosystem over here as well, because that's something which the commercial banks have been doing. They lend money to the government, take it back overnight, sleep on it, treasury bills and all of that. So that's not really the ecosystem for an SME to operate in the first place. And I think that's where we've had that backlash too. How do you think that this ecosystem can get better? Because, banks should always be there to lend money, rather than asking for my property, my goals, stuff I have to give to the bank. And then towards the end of the day, they still actually find a reason for not to give me the money. Imagine that in Japan, for all of those banks who are out there, if they have a certain amount of money within the banks, they are being fined by the government, that why do you still carry that amount of money with you? You're supposed to lend it to people out there. So how do you think that ecosystem is going to change over here in Pakistan so that we can empower more people?
Shahzad, what you've pointed out is a policy question. So basically,
and you worked with the policy.
Yes, I've worked in the policy sector as well. So the thing is, we forget that banks are also businesses. They're out here to make money. money.
Yeah.
And the easier the route, the better it is. And that's what they're doing. The problem is that the government is borrowing most from the banks.
Yeah.
So they're the main borrower, and they're crowding out the private sector.
True.
So if the government reduces borrowing from the banks would be pushed to lend to the private sector and small businesses, which they don't have to right now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
And why does the government have to borrow from the commercial banks? Because they're not raising enough tax revenues. So that's the problem.
I mean, I've been giving tax all my life.
Vicious circle,
Yeah.
I've been giving tax all my life, you know, and like.
But you are a responsible and a good citizen. So I wish
I
we
mean,
had
even if
more
I
people
wasn't
like you.
responsible, they cut it from my salary anyway. You know, I still have to pay it.
Yeah. So moving on to the financial inclusion and gender-based financial inclusion, I believe Karandaaz is doing some ventures in this field. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah, so we call it Women Ventures.
Wonderful.
It's our flagship program for gender financing. It supports growing women-led businesses. So there are certain types of businesses we work with, businesses that have 3 years operational history. They're earning a revenue of 5 million at least, and they're led by a woman, which means that majority shareholding is of a woman. So the reason is that these are businesses that are serious. They figured out their business, and now they're at a growth stage, and they need the money to grow. And we provide business development support. So we help plan out their growth phase, fund utilization plans, and all. We provide that technical support in helping businesses figure that out. We also give them financial management training, because that's a major weakness.
So it's more like an incubation center?
No. So incubation centers, they would work with startups. So people who want to start a business, they would go to incubation centers, and incubation centers would help firm up their ideas. We work with SMEs. These are businesses that are already out there. They're existing. They've been in operation for the last at least 3 years, and now they want to grow. So they've got a track history.
Right.
So they're the ones we work with, and we give concessional financing under Women Ventures. So because we do realize that they're far behind, and they work in a very difficult environment. It's difficult for SMEs, and for women-led SMEs, it's even more difficult. So they need that concessional financing to get that growth spurt that they desperately need.
All right, wow.
Wonderful. I think that's a really great. So please elaborate on your demographics. Which sort of women do you target? And considering the fact that there are a lot of spaces or a lot of areas within Pakistan where, because of the conservative constraints on them, they're not allowed to step out of their houses. But I do feel that entrepreneurship is making inroads there, and they are doing a wonderful job in empowering women out there. So please elaborate on your demographics. Is it a rural or versus urban spaces?
So Hajra, right now it's urban.
Right.
And it's because it's the way our economy is.
Okay.
So most of the formal economic activity is in the urban centers.
Right.
Beyond it, you see agriculture.
True.
So our businesses the business that we support are in Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad. It's not by design.
Okay.
So the applicants come from there. We want to move beyond tier 1 cities. We want to go into smaller cities, also into rural as well, if the businesses are established enough and if they can absorb that kind of funding, because we don't want to burden them with debt. They'd take that debt and they won't be able to return it. So whatever business they have, it will collapse. We don't want that to happen. So it's basically in urban centers, but we've also partnered with National Bank of Pakistan. And the idea is that we move beyond these small cities, and we also go into rural areas. And for rural areas, basically microfinance taps into rural areas, and we support microfinance through Pakistan Microfinance Investment Company. We're shareholders in it, and through them we reach out to rural areas.
Wow, and it's wonderful, and I think that we pretty much really need to kind of do that as well. But on that question, now the world and the technology has evolved so much that it's not really always the matter that you really need to step outside to kind of do something for yourselves. People have been doing it just at the luxury of at their homes as well. So which business is liable to get that funding from Karandaaz? I think that's one thing which I would want to ask. For example, because you might do the assessment, your organization will do it, and then if you think that the business might not even survive in the next 2 years or 3 years, do you think that you will still finance it and give them what they require? Or would you tell them straight to their face, hey, you know what, we don't think that your business is going to work out? Because, we have a lot of gurus and pundits over here who are like, hey, karwar nahi chalne wala tera, things like that. So how does Karandaaz treat with that? For example, if I already have an existing business, I'm a woman, okay, I came to you, I'm like, Shumaila ji, bada takleef mein hu, to business doob raha hai mera, aap kya karengi phir?
So basically, it's very important for us that we select the right kind of businesses who would be able to
that's the
repay,
question, yeah.
because our model is based on recyclable funding.
Yeah,
So the
sustainable
money we
funding.
recover, it's given to more businesses.
Yep.
So it's not a profit motive, but we want to reach out to maximum number of women. Also, we don't want to overburden them with debt, the wrong kind of businesses. Like,
Okay.
so if they're struggling, if they're a loss-making entity, we would still, we might give them a chance if we see they're very clear on their future path.
Okay.
If they're clear how they're going to turn it around and make it a profit-making
So
entity.
how do you judge it yourself? Because you guys do not have any sort of business. That's what you do. How do you guys judge it? Do you hire teams?
So the selection process is in-house, and we've been through so many rounds, we can tell now. And it's basically the entrepreneur itself, how clear that person is, and that applies in every field. Right. If you've basically worked, you can tell how clear a person is in terms of your future direction and ambition and how you're going to get there. There are lots of dreamers out there.
Is it that sort of a question? Where do you see yourself in next 5 years?
That's a very difficult question. Like in this sort of economy, asking where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Whether you see yourself in Pakistan or not, I think that's a question that
especially
needs to
that
be
is
asked.
struck by so much floods, because I think economic activity has been, has been freeze because of those.
And then every other day there is a dharna, yaar, for all of those small businesses, how do you think they're going to work? And fortunately for that, I have a lot of respect for everybody, but for somebody who certainly have never had any sort of business, how would they understand that, how much harm they're bringing to just the ordinary people of their nation?
So, the most objective people are those who are outside the fishbowl. So those inside the fishbowl, they're just dealing with the situation, and there's some very key areas they would overlook. And that could be the issue that's bringing the business down and not growing.
Are they able to swim, or are they drowning?
They are, because, if you meet these people, they're phenomenal women. Like, I was myself surprised the kind of areas they've developed business in, and those are male-dominated areas, and they have that kind of energy and perseverance to, to prove themselves.
Wonderful.
And they've done very well. The environment is so difficult. Like, first COVID, 3 years.
True.
The survival was a key question. At that time, growth was secondary. After that, floods happened.
True.
After that, you have this political, crazy economic situation. So it's a very, very difficult, protracted period for businesses. These are very brave people who have businesses.
But Karandaaz is still going to be out there to help them.
We definitely support them. Even during COVID, we gave them support packages, like we gave salary grants, we gave them, extensions for repayment periods, we gave them working capital. So we knew that these businesses would struggle, and we wanted them to survive, so we gave them that support.
Wow, and you obviously have already assessed that these businesses are going to survive post-COVID and whatever, God forbid, calamity is going to come. So the homework is being done.
So
it's wonderful. So for all of those women who are listening to us, मैं उर्दू में कहूँगा, जितनी भी ख़वातीन जो हमें सुन रही हैं, जिनके ऑलरेडी कारोबार हैं, बिजनेसेस हैं, उनको कुछ इमदाद नहीं, मदद की ज़रूरत है to survive. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have the perfect lady over here. Please say it onto the camera as well, how can people get in touch with you, how can they reach out to you, and what are the prerequisites for applying for whatever funding is available on Karandaaz?
So basically, online application process. Go to our website, www.karandaaz.com.pk. Go to the Women Ventures page. It's an online process. If you know how much revenue you're making, how much profit you make, and what you want to do, fill out. It's very simple, and we'll take you from there.
Wow, and please make sure that you do not overdo it, because sometimes people ask me about my salary. I triple it at times as well. But thank you very much, Shumaila, for being with us. Lovely to be in conversation with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of these facilities and platforms are out there. All you need to do is know about them, and if you know about them, please make sure that you use it as a word of mouth so that every other can actually benefit from it. The process is simple. Log online, make sure that you give in some authentic information, and they will then, from there onwards, they will take you through as well. I think that's wonderful. I'm going to give this advice to my mother too. Wow.
Wonderful. I think especially in the times of, like she mentioned, the COVID, and especially after COVID, there were floods, economic instability. So I do believe that such kind of ventures are helping out people out there, whoever needs the help in terms of the funding, in terms of any kind of support. So do reach out to them, and with that, we are ending our show.
Exactly.
And until next time, it's a goodbye. Allah
1, 2, 3, good morning. Jumma Mubarak.